So welcome to, this is probably our first Spartacus webinar. And this one is very special because we have a guest. I'll introduce Robbie a little bit later. But the topic of this meeting is when project manager meets developer. So let me start with the agenda of today's meeting. So we'll start with introduction, and I'll tell you who are we. You probably know us, but anyway, it's a good manner to introduce ourselves. Then a short update about what's going on with Spartacus and new releases. Then we'll get into the main section of this meeting where I'll be interviewing Robbie, or we'll be just having a talk about the project that we did together and what can you learn about that. It was the implementation project of Spartacus. We'll also give you a little bit of context what the project was all about. And in the end, we are hoping for a nice Q&A session. So if you would like to ask a question, you can do that throughout the whole meeting. Just put the question on the chat room, either on LinkedIn or on Zoom call. In the chat, just end the question, the message with question mark, and then we'll answer that. We won't answer that immediately, but we will check all the chat rooms and answer in the end of the meeting. So let's start with the introduction. I'm Mateusz Ostafil. I'm technology evangelist and Spartacus trainer at Divante. I'm working with Spartacus since version 1, and now we have version 4.2. So it was only 2 years, or at least 2 years. And I've been involved in a couple of projects, implementation projects, and today we'll be with Robbie Ablett. We'll be talking about one. And I'm representing the developer side, and on the other side is the project manager, Robbie Ablett.
Cool. Yeah, hi guys. So yeah, my name's Robbie, as Mateusz just mentioned. I love leading software development teams. Really, just obviously working in a very agile kind of way. I started off on the infrastructure side, so many years ago it was all about waterfall at that stage. But once I started getting involved with software development, I just sort of fell in love with, the building blocks of every sprint or iteration, seeing how the product you're building is improving. And it's kind of like, but the thing which really sort of sold that way of working to me was really around the engagement with the customer and the client, and obviously with the team as well, breaking down barriers, making ourselves into the best possible team that we can possibly be. And as a result of that, I've got various different qualifications. I'm a Scrum professional at the moment. I'm also a certified Agile practitioner from the PMI world. I'm a PMP. I've got experience in Scrum, Kanban, DSDM, extreme programming. And I just really love it. I love it. And for me, it's all about everybody at the end of the project just being really proud of what they've achieved. And that's always my goal, is to get the team to work well together and to deliver something we can all be proud of.
Yeah, it's clearly visible, Robbie, that you love what you are doing. And I can honestly say that you are one of the best project managers that I worked with. So for those who expected that we're going to be fighting here, the developer against project manager, it's probably not going to happen here. But anyway, we'll be talking also about challenges and difficult stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about quickly what's new in Spartacus. So since our last webinar, which was like the second half of the last year, two new releases appeared in November 2021. The version 4.2 was released, and some nice features were added, like import-export card from CSV, product image zoom. It was long-awaited feature, quite simple one, but it was longly awaited, and a lot of people asked me about it. When will it come out? And it's finally there. Also, card validation is there. So all the issues when a user leaves the session and comes back and wants to check out the card, which is like kind of old, and some products are out of stock, then the user will be informed about such issues. Also, some UX improvement with scroll position restoration, which is usually a problem with single page applications, that you go back in history of your browser and the scroll jumps wherever to some arbitrary place. Now it's fixed. Order history has been moved to separate libraries, so it's good for like loading and performance improvements. And that's it regarding the version 4.2. This year we had only one minor release, 4.3, and it wasn't so breaking through because it was just an integration with SAP Enterprise Product Visualization integration, visualization software. So it's for visualizing some bigger machines and showing which part goes where, and you can actually browse product based on that. So kind of a big feature, but not used for everyone. The next version that we are anticipating greatly is the version 5.0, which recently, unfortunately, was moved to September. It was supposed to be released in May or even earlier this year, but it was moved to September 2022. And that's because I'm not that into SAP process, but they are making some changes in the delivery process, and Spartacus is going to undergo some audits and some special needs some special approvals of SAP. But that at the same time, this means that SAP will be that Spartacus will be more solid product of SAP. So this is some kind of managerial process, but it's needed for Spartacus to still grow and move forward. But because the version is delayed so much, it will contain a lot of features, a lot of new features which I'm waiting for. So first of all, it will have an update to Angular 13 or 14. It depends on when exactly it will be released, because by September 2022, will probably the Angular 14 will be already released. It depends whether the core team will be able to migrate the code to the newest version of Angular. One of the major features in the upcoming version is screen reader support. So all the accessibility stuff, more code splitting, so for lazy loading of other libraries. An interesting thing is that they are introducing commanded queries for checkout. This is for the technical people around here. It's the planned replacement for the NGRX state management. They are moving to their proprietary feature, which is called command queries. And I've checked it out already, and it works quite nice because NGRX has its problems or limitations, and the custom implementation of that works quite well. So I'm hoping for that. Another awaited feature from the business perspective is buy online, pick up in store. B2B commerce quotes, product bundles, and many more. But since till September, it's half year ahead, so I think more and more features will be added then later. So that's it about Spartacus so far. So let's move on to the main part of our webinar today, and talk about the project that we did together with Robbie. First, let's give a little bit of a context. What kind of a project was that? First of all, it was in the manufacturing sector, and it was a B2B portal for the partners of our client. And it was an interesting project because it was a greenfield project. So there was a previous solution of e-commerce, but it was plan was to shut it down and create something new from scratch. So not only there was not much migration to do, only some product data which came from ERP, but it was most of all it was a greenfield project. So we had to build everything from stage one. And the time of delivery was for the MVP was since March to September 2022. So it was just in time where pandemic kicked in. We'll be talking about that. That was an interesting factor of of our cooperation. But the deadline for delivering MVP was 6 months, and we met that deadline. And then, but the project was not limited to this. We were working a lot longer, and project is still being developed and in the continuous improvement mode. So it's already for 2 years there. The tech stack consists of SAP Commerce Cloud, obviously, but for logging in and registration, the SAP Customer Data Cloud was used, and also known as Gigia. And we also integrated that with some custom CMS and custom ERP systems. And that was integrated on front end with SAP Spartacus. And we started with version 2.0, and then successively we migrated to version 4.3, which is the current version. And the team consisted, that's also an interesting factor, that the team consisted, it was a joint effort of two companies, Divante and KPS. And Divante was responsible for product design and front-end implementation. And KPS was responsible for project management and back-end implementation, which worked quite well, I would say. What do you think about that, Robbie?
Yeah, I do as well. One of the big sort of challenges was, obviously the COVID hit us. So we already knew we were going to have to work remotely, but we weren't quite sure when we were going to be able to meet each other face to face. And Mateusz and I, for example, we haven't actually still met face to face yet, but we will be hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it was a real kind of hurdle, I guess, to overcome initially, was that how do we get two organizations that make up one development team to work together? And I remember as we went through the kind of discovery period, just making sure that I knew from the word go that it was going to be tight deadlines, and as I say, everyone working remotely is throwing extra challenge into the mix. And I knew that the only way we were going to be able to deliver this is if we break down all the barriers straight away. So there's no politics from one side or the other. It's all about it's one team, one project, and we're building to one product. And trying to get people into that mindset was one of the initial goals that I set myself during the discovery phase. And it worked really well, actually. There's always teething issues at the start of any project as we form as a new team. And, we agreed our ways of working during the discovery phase. But as always, as you start to get into development, there's always initial problems you've got to overcome, like making sure requirements are in a fit state to be developed, back end and front end dependencies and how we manage that, all that kind of stuff, which we'll be talking about a bit later on in this, I'm sure. But yeah, there's a lot of things to iron out initially, but overall we worked excellently well. And, both organizations supported each other all the way through the project. There was no them and us. There's no pointing fingers at anything. If there was a problem, we embraced it together. And as a result of that, we obviously delivered the project really well. Exactly.
And one more thing I've missed here is that Robbie is not still moved on to another project. But you worked for how long did you work on that project?
I was on the project for 18 months. And when I left that project, it was because it was in such a great state, and the roadmap was well developed, and the team were well established with a excellent mindset of continuous improvement. Again, we'll talk about that a bit later on as well. And yeah, it just felt like it was a good time for me to move on to my next challenge, really.
Exactly. And I'm still involved in the project, but in a very little portion, because as Robbie said, the team is stable and working on their own. I'm just there for consulting and technical stuff. If they need, they ask for my support. So I'm always there for support, but every week it's less and less. they less and less need me. Okay, so I'll stop sharing the screen so we can focus on the discussion. So let's start from the beginning. How to start such a big project, Robbie? How did you tackle that?
Well, to be honest, it was immediately, as soon as I became involved with the conversations. It was a very unique situation. As you mentioned, the pandemic had just kicked in. Everybody had just gone into lockdown. So we did the discovery, and everything was remote. And it was really weird, because normally when you have a discovery, that's when everyone goes on the client site or vice versa. Everyone starts to build up, those relationships and that rapport with each other. So that in itself sort of threw another kind of spanner in the works, as we say here in England, and another challenge that we actually had to overcome, because it became harder to build those relationships. But anyway, everyone still threw everything at it. And everyone embraced the challenge. obviously that's where I first met you, Mateusz. You were there obviously from looking at a project from a front end perspective, and really we already had a product backlog. It was we picked up the project. It was already a previously sort of failed one, so again that sort of threw in its own challenges there. But one of the advantages was that there was an existing backlog, so we went through the backlog together. We talked about the different challenges, and we want to get ourselves in a position where we could estimate that backlog. And then from that, I could start to build the plan. However, the discovery isn't just about requirements. Discovery is also about how we're going to work with each other. And this is the bit which I'm most passionate about. For me, if you can get the team working in a really great way, it doesn't matter what the project is, it will take care of itself. And so, we went through things like talking through about the project framework. So for this project, we used Scrum, which meant that, I had to work with the client to get them on board with our ways of working, speak to different individuals on the client side and also from Divante and KPS side to make sure we're all aligned with our ways of working. We wanted to discuss how we're going to communicate with each other, which is going to be a huge, communication is obviously one of the most important things anyway, but bear in mind everyone's going to be remote. Having the right tools available to everybody, that was going to become more critical in that project. So again, it was very much a case of trying to agree what tools we were going to use there. We wanted to define what the test strategy was, and I wanted to give people the vision of what we're trying to build, what we're actually doing here, and then to create that safe environment really where everyone already feels like they're a valued team member. And once we've done all that collaboration, it was very much a case of then pulling everybody back together. That includes SAP, stakeholders from KPS, from Divante, stakeholders from the client side as well as the direct developers. Everybody was in one meeting at the end of the discovery where we had the kickoff, and that's where we walked through what was in scope, what was out of scope. We talked through how we're going to deliver the project, the strategy, the timelines, the risks, the assumptions, all that kind of stuff. So everybody hears that same message. And then it meant that when we started Sprint Zeros, it was it was very much a case of everyone knew what each other was doing. And it leaves less ambiguity, I guess, between, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and what the expectations of the project is going to be.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you have to have in mind that it was just the beginning of the pandemic, and everyone was actually learning, just starting to learn how to work in this remote environment. But from my perspective, what was helping is that the children running in the background and screaming, it was actually something that brought us closer, because it was not like one person from some country is joining the online conference. Everyone was like that, closed in their homes, and we've seen each other's families. So it was from my perspective, it was something that brought us closer to each other.
Definitely. I mean, that for me is what made this whole project unique, because everyone, quite often people talk about the challenges of COVID, but one of the benefits actually for us in this project was that we got to see another side of professional people. And, sometimes you do see the personal side of people you work with, but you just get a glimpse into their life. And, with COVID, it kind of threw us into their houses. I got to know the product owner really well, got to know her kids. She got to know my kids. I remember once that, I was using Louis' bedroom as my son. I was using his bedroom as the office, and he ran in and got changed while he's on Zoom. And, this creates this dynamic of something that would never normally happen, ever. Yeah. And for some reason, it was okay, because everyone was facing that same issue. And as you say, I've made lifelong friends out of this project. Mm-hmm.
So I think that even if there wouldn't be COVID, then we would need to work remotely, because Divante is working from Poland, you are from England, and the client was from Nordics. So it were actually 3 time zones, different time zones. So to some degree, we would have to work separately. And because everyone had to work separately, everyone had to work remotely, there were no silos.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the challenges, was because even when you're co-located, it's you don't so much get silos. But as you say, you've got yourself in Poland and your team in Poland. We're in London, and then in Finland and, wherever. And it kind of, it's an easy thing where, well, we had to work harder to make sure the communication worked. And I do remember there were many days, and I was finishing a get day and I was mentally exhausted, because it wasn't a case of just having a quick chat with yourself. You almost have to put something in a diary sometimes just to get that time with you, and that through its own sort of challenges. It's that mental kind of strength really to keep pushing and keep trying to get through the barrier of starting a Zoom call or jumping on a Hangout or whatever it might be, to be able to talk to the people you wanted to talk to.
Mm-hmm. And so I've touched the time zone topic twice, and I'm usually involved in the calls with new clients. And recently, it's always a question when talking with new client: how do you deal with time zone difference in the projects? What's your take on that?
So the main thing I did was in Google Calendar, you've got like the times that you've got a time zone difference. So whenever I book meetings with people, so the client was based in Finland, so I just use that as the primary time zone, and I kind of just fitted in really with that time zone, and everything else is like -1 or -2. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was difficult, and there was times where, the whole team, sometimes we had to start early from the UK perspective, just to be able to get the time in people's diaries, because, while the project was very important to us, other people with it on the client side, they had their own day job to deal with as well. And, sometimes you just got to fit around, what people are doing. But it is not an easy answer to it, other mm-hmm. than, other than just being understanding to where people are in the world and when you're working with them, and trying to, not, make things a little bit, not to basically inconvenience people too much is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. But it is difficult to manage that for sure.
Yeah, and now I remember that bigger challenge than the time zone differences were the cultural or national differences, that sometimes all countries have their own national holidays, and sometimes if they stack up, it's like someone is not available, some part of the team is not available for a whole week or even more.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So in the Nordics, so I work with sort of IKEA as well, so I had experience of this. But yeah, in the summertime, for example, if people generally go away for the summer holidays, they take the month or maybe 6 weeks off. And, that's something which not a lot of other sort of cultures in the European world do. They might take a few extra weeks off in August, perhaps. But when the people in the Nordics go on their holiday, everything kind of comes to a standstill. And and when you're in the midst of a project, and it becomes a bit of a challenge sometimes if you haven't been able to build that into your plan.
Yeah, because you don't get any substitutions. They all go on the same on the same Absolutely, day for holiday. Yeah. You don't get any substitution for the very person that you want to ask one question that would unblock you for the next couple of hours.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me get into more technical topic, and another challenge that we had is that headless architecture is said to enable the separate development of backend and frontend, and this is how this technology is marketed. And from technical perspective, it is possible and it is doable to develop the code separately for backend and for frontend. But how it is from the project manager point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in projects before where you have back-end, front-end stories. And to be honest with you, it creates a dependency nightmare. Basically, you're doubling the tickets that are required for the project. And it becomes very hard to know what's being finished in the back end and where it's linked to the front end. And yes, you can link tickets in Jira or in Azure DevOps, which is the tool we were using for this particular project. But it's not easy. And for me, it stems right back to what is the point of a user story? A user story is a requirement. It's a user of the system wanting to be able to achieve something. It has no comprehension of whether it's a back end or front end split. It is just a requirement. And actually, and so on this project, we had just one story, I just encouraged the collaboration through the team to make sure that when a back-end person had finished with their work, they handed it over to the front end. They finished their development, and then they handed it over to the QA. There was no kind of like throwing it over the fence at people. And by encouraging that behavior, it meant that there was really good collaboration throughout the team. As part of sprint planning, we almost create like little pods as well. So if we had a particular requirement, I'll put Mateusz on there, perhaps Massimo from the back end, and and that becomes like the team for that user story. So if the front end person has questions, they know directly who to go to, and then the person who's on the back end, once they've finished their work, they know who to speak with immediately to be able to hand that story over to the front end. And as I said, it's all about creating that communication, that collaboration, and by doing that, it also helped to remove like the fact that got KPS and Divante as well. It made us one team, and it worked brilliantly well.
But it was difficult in the beginning to make the developers work together, because they were kind of expecting such a separation, but in the end it turned out that it's not. It maybe technically on the paper it's possible, but in the real project it wasn't. They had to reach out to each other and work together actually, and that was a big effort from me as a team leader and from you as a project manager to break that barrier.
Definitely, it took time, right? It did take time. It took a few sprints to really get going with that. And once people could see it was working, they started to adopt that way of working, and they accepted it. But as I say, for me, the user story is the actual requirements, the user of the system. It's not there to make sort of a developer's life easier to have a back end and a front end story. That's actually what subtasks are for. The story is the requirement, some stories of ours had subtasks, others didn't. We relied on people communicating to each other to be able to get that ticket across the line. And as I said, each sprint we mixed the teams up as well, so it wasn't always the same back end and front end developer together. So it meant that everyone got to know each other, had a good rapport. Also, it meant that the developers had a good understanding of the whole system, which again becomes really important, especially later on in the project, when you start get defects from like the UAT defects. You're not thinking, I'm okay, Mateusz, he looks after the checkout, so only he can have those defects. We didn't want to get ourselves into that situation if we could avoid it. So again, we were trying to share that knowledge throughout the system, really make it easier for ourselves in the end.
Yeah, and worth mentioning is that you did a good job documenting that. So because I've bookmarked the Confluence pages where I had a visual, I could visually see who is working with who on what, and because of that, which backend developer is assigned to me in this sprint. So I knew to whom I should reach for the given topic.
Definitely, and when we put those teams together, they weren't set in stone. No, because what sprints, even 2-week sprints, a lot can happen in 2 weeks. But it's a starting point. When we go into that sprint, we kind of got a plan of how things are going to shape up. But then the team adapts according to what the sprint and the project desires during those next few weeks. But by having that kind of mindset of like who's likely to be working with who, it just makes everyone's lives that little bit easier. And we weren't really in a position where, because there was just so much to do. It needed, and the team was so big. I think we had at the peak, we had 5 back end, 5 front end developers working together, and it would have been quite difficult to sort of stay on top of that, I guess. But having that kind of structure just allowed us to just have a good idea for 2 weeks, like who's going to be working with who.
And there was also a churn in the teams, that some people were joining, some people were leaving, and actually the front end team from the beginning to the end replaced itself completely. So it was a whole cycle.
Yeah, they did. But the people who started the project, they created the foundations for the guys coming in. Yeah, and they actually targeted the more complex areas of the project initially, which in our world was the product details page. The mega menu. Do you remember the mega menu? That was a nightmare.
It always is.
Yeah. But by the end, we were so quick, and the reason for that was because of the strategy we decided to employ, which is to obviously create components that could be reusable across the site. And we knew in the beginning that would potentially slow us down a little bit, but we knew that would enable us to be a lot faster towards the end of the project and beyond, as we enhance those components as well. So, and the fact the project was delivered so well, sort of really kind of underlines the importance of trying to get that right kind of strategy deployed at the beginning. Now, one of the projects I've worked on in the past, it wasn't like that. And now, they're going through and they're now creating these new components which are reusable. So you're avoiding rework ultimately by getting the approach right in the beginning.
And you've touched one point that I'm especially proud of, that you mentioned that the new people were able to onboard really quickly, and that's a very good metric for showing the quality of the code that the guys created. That new developers joined, like you remember Łukasz, when he had no prior experience with Spartacus actually, but was like after 1 week he was able to fix bugs, and then after 2 weeks he delivered some stories, maybe simpler but some stories, and that's actually from my experience is quite fast that you can onboard a developer that quickly and make him profitable in the project.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he brought value immediately. I just remember he just resolved so many defects. I thought he'll be a bit slow to start with, just because I knew he was new to the project and Angular and all that. But actually, he started resolving those defects really, really quickly, and he came back sort of defect master initially. And everyone was like, to Lucas, he'll fix it in a minute. He's become a very important member of that team. And I'm not sure if he's still on the project, but he was when I left.
Yeah, he's still there, and he has a leading role there right now. So
amazing! Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, he's a great developer. But also some of the onboarding, which often gets missed, especially when teams are busy, is to actually give that bit of context actually around what the project is actually about. And because sometimes people just get thrown in and like, here's some defects to fix, here's some user stories to develop, but actually they don't understand what we're building towards again. So quite the kickoff presentation I did right at the beginning. Now I would have taught Łukasz and everyone else who joined the project, Tomasz as well, through that initial kickoff. Instead, we've given that historical kind of lifeline of like where we were, the journey we've been on, where we are now, and then to sort of paint the vision of like, this is what's coming up, just to really kind of whet the appetite and get them excited about what we're doing.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next my next question on my list, and it's still about the headless. But now we've been talking about our two teams working together, how it was perceived from the client side.
Well, that's a good question. So in the beginning, it was very much a case of I would have regular catch-ups, and it'd be a case of how KPS doing and how our Divante doing in terms of like are we roughly on track with the project, etc. But to be honest with you, that didn't last very long, because as a result, we really we were delivering things collectively. We had each other's backs. Again, it was very much a case of, we're here to try and deliver what the client is asking for. I wanted to get away from us being different organizations. And I wanted the client not to think of us as external organizations either. I wanted them to think of us as the development team, not the external partners that they're paying to get the job done. Certainly when I left the project, that's how it felt. It felt like we're really part of the client team. We're engaged with a lot of conversations. We can help influence decisions. So we feel valued, which is a really lovely thing, because we as consultants, we bring so much expertise, but often we just get overlooked because we're the people there to develop and deliver a project. But the client we're working with, they allowed us into their organization, and they took our advice, and they gave us a demo, or rather they walked us around their factory. So we got to understand their business as well. And as a result of that, we came back and there's loads of requirements, user stories that we need to implement. And we knew exactly what they meant and how they worked in the factory and why it's being developed in the particular way that it is. It gives us so much more context. And as a result of that, I do feel like it's now a product organization rather than separate organizations making up a team.
But it requires a lot of effort. And I'm telling this to the people who are starting with such a project. So it's worth it to spend, because at the beginning it was different. We were like we had to build this credibility in front of the client, who I can say did not trust us, and that's natural. Did not trust us 100% from the beginning, but after some time we were able to build that up, and that simply requires some effort.
Exactly, and there's some of the reasons why the trust element was there in the beginning. And it wasn't there with everybody. It was, so the product owner, so she had full faith in us, and that sort of gave us the confidence to be ourselves and perform and do the right thing. But it was a failed project originally, as I mentioned before. So there's kind of that apprehension about, will we be able to come in and deliver this project? Is it too hard? So people are a bit worried about that. But also, I do think the contract type that we had is also very important. So we started the initial phase of the project, and it's a fixed price, fixed scope contract. And that obviously that's there to protect the client, really. We're also a little bit protected as well as their size. It's not all one way, but it's ultimately to protect the client side, and that they won't overspend and all that stuff. But what that does is it does create that kind of relationship, I guess, where they want to make sure we've done everything that we were supposed to do and not get out of it in any way. And obviously, as professionals, we wouldn't want to do that anyway. We want to deliver what the scope is. But once that fixed price contract was finished and completed, and we went into time and materials, everything all changed. It was just like all of a sudden, it was it's hard to explain really, that it became so much more collaborative. The product owner, she would join us on our retrospectives, and she became such a core and important part of our team. And I just wish that we had invited her sooner, but it was difficult to invite her because it was a fixed price, fixed scope project, and we just had our own stuff that we needed to sort out. And in hindsight, I should have brought her into our retrospectives a little bit sooner. But yeah, honestly, I think the contract type is also very important about the mindset of people.
Yeah, and that's not. I would say that it's not. That's not only. It's not a bad will of the client to do so. It's that just naturally, if the people that we were dealing with, they had to explain to their supervisors that they that we delivered the best quality for the given price. So it's natural. So and it built a high pressure. And here I want to touch a more Spartacus specific topic, that because I was leading the team of front-end developers, that front-end is at the very end and at the very face of the user. So all the bugs and things and finger pointing started from throwing that at the front-end, because we are on the front line. So it built a enormous pressure on the developers, and they felt that if they went over the estimates when doing the when doing the task, they felt bad about themselves, that, oh, my company is losing money because I haven't delivered something on time. So it was quite challenging for me as a team leader to ease that pressure from the front end developers.
Yeah, it is difficult for front ends, and hopefully when you never felt that pressure from me, it's very much a case of like, what can we do to help? And I think back to, again, how we started that project. And obviously, Divante, you guys, you estimated your own side of the project, KPS estimated theirs. And then I kind of sat in the middle, really. That's how I saw myself. I was trying to pull these estimates together. And, I think it's really important to make sure that obviously, when you estimate a project, you remember to include the ceremony time. So if we're working in Scrum, we've got sprint planning, sprint review, the retro, even stand-ups, the time that adds up over a couple of weeks. And you've got to take that into account, if you can take into account people's holidays and things. But yeah, and also I think sort of looking further ahead was that we had to deliver this project in ultimately 6 sprints. So we had a fixed deadline, and we sort of worked backwards in terms of, we needed a month of UAT, and then we've got X number of weeks in order to actually do the development work. It was like 3, 6, 9. 13 weeks of development that I think we had. Yeah, I think that's right. And so it's really not an awful lot of time at all. But actually, in hindsight, I think because the front end team always get the work last, it's almost you need to give an extra sprint, one more sprint than you actually think you need, just to allow the front end team that time to finish things off. Because sometimes you'll get towards the end of a sprint, and the back end team have just handed over something, and then the front end guys have literally got like a day or two to get things completed. And it's not the back end team's fault that it's taken longer than anticipated. It's just the way it is sometimes. And actually giving yourself that little bit of extra buffer is one way. Or perhaps as you go into UAT, you plan that certain parts are going to come a little bit later into UAT. So that way, UAT can still officially start when you want it to. But then that, let's say, the my account area, that will come a week or two into UAT. So yeah, there's different ways to approach it, but yeah, you should always definitely a lesson learned is to take into account the extra time for front end to finish up.
Yeah, that's something I honestly haven't foreseen during doing the estimations. In the end, when I analyzed the initial estimates and the work that was done by the developers, it turned out that the pure development time was almost all right with the estimate. What I did not take into consideration, that's a lessons learned for the people who are listening to us, is that the front end is at the very end, as I mentioned, and it creates this snowball effect that you've mentioned. That first we are waiting for some decision from the client, then the product designer starts delayed work on and working on the designs, and if he slips on, then this adds another delay. Then the backend developer starts working on that and adds another delay, and the delay on the front end grows bigger and bigger.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, luckily, I had incorporated the your estimates into like the sprint plans, so I already could forecast like how many extra developers we needed. But what was great about working with senior leadership at Divante was, we had that conversation before the project started. And we were always monitoring every sprint, just seeing how we're progressing against where we were in the plan. And because, I was essentially replanning at the end of each sprint, I was able to see whether we were on track or not. And I could see straight away from after sprint one that we were struggling a little bit. And the senior management of Divante were always there to support us, give me the extra developers. Actually, I think we had two in the end. And then a third came in to learn the Spartacus right at the end, just to resolve a few defects. But for the core development, we just needed a couple of extra devs, and that made a difference. And that's how we were able to, basically finish the development pretty much in 6 sprints.
Yeah. So has the project met the deadline?
Well, it was actually 3 weeks late when it went live. So, and there's always a number of reasons for this as well. So in terms of the back-end development, they were finished in sprint 5. There was a little bit of extra work, which they didn't get a chance to do just due to dependencies. So dependencies is something you should always watch out for and stay on top of during the project, because they can catch you out at the end if you're not careful. And I think that basically the reason why it's sort of 3 weeks late was ultimately down to testing, and that comes back to the point which Mateusz raised earlier. Around summer holidays, and we got to a point where we just got the integrations working. We tested it from a development point of view that products can come into the system from other systems, and it was all looking good, but it wasn't at a state where testers could pick up the work and run with it. And unfortunately, everyone was away for sort of 3 or 4 weeks, so we managed to catch up a little bit. But yeah, it was ultimately the testing which pushed us out a little bit in the end.
Mm-hmm. But like 3 weeks, it's not that much, to be honest. Based on my experience of the projects, the deadline, I haven't seen a project that met deadline exactly, and 3 weeks, it's, I think, acceptable.
Yeah, I was disappointed though. I was disappointed it wasn't on time, because if you take away like the summer holidays, I'm certain we would have hit that go live date initially. It's one of those things where we knew about the holidays, we took it into account, but we didn't really realize the real impact of it. And that's something to learn as well. But what was great about that, even though the team's late, so the project is a few weeks late, everyone still worked really well together to try and get it across the line. And the approach the client ended up taking for the launch was to go with a soft launch. So it's a B2B website that we were building, and the only way you could access it is via an invite. So you would get an invite in your inbox, and then you just need to sign up, and then you can access the portal. So the client could really pick and choose who went onto the platform and when. So they started off with a few friendly customers of theirs to get some initial feedback. And then as we were carried on introducing new functionality over a period of time after the initial launch, they started to invite more people from Germany, UK, which is where the two sites were that we implemented initially, onto the site, and it's just continued to grow. So one good thing was that the implementation strategy was quite low risk and low pressure because of the approach they decided to take.
Yes, and I, from my perspective, the go live was so smooth that I haven't noticed it.
That's what it was like, yeah.
I learned a few weeks later that we are accepting orders, and the money is flowing through the system. Actually, exactly, so.
Yeah, to be honest, I was the same. I was on the project. Yeah, I remember the product owner. She just said, "Oh yeah, we've got people on the platform now." So all right, okay.
Yeah, I was actually prepared for crunching over the weekend that they went live, and we went live, and there are errors on the on production, and there's this huge fire, and we need to sit the whole weekend to fix the bugs, but it wasn't there.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was a couple of times where we got asked to work 2 weekends. I thought pushed back against it. Actually, I didn't think we needed to, and we didn't. There wasn't enough work for the developers to do. Just that I think at the time the client was feeling very nervous, and they wanted to make sure that because I think they were testing over the weekend, so it was a case of if something came up, they wanted to have that, feel like they had that support. But yeah, honestly, what was great as well, I think, is over the course of that initial project, and one of the core reasons why we delivered it really well and the time frame we did was because of retrospectives. And quite often they get overlooked, and when projects get into trouble, quite often that meeting is dropped completely. But actually, that's you're creating a rod for your back by doing that. And the reason for that is because if there are issues in the project, they're never going to go away, and things are never going to get better unless you bring those problems to the surface and you talk about how you can try and resolve them. And while the developers are away working in the sprints, developing the user stories, the outputs of the retrospective become my to-do list for the next couple of weeks. And while it may not be me actioning everything, I'm the one pushing and driving and making sure that these problems are resolved. And I would communicate that on things like the stand-up, so people could see on the stand-up that I was really actively pushing to make things better. And actually that helped to improve and create that environment of continuous improvement, which the team is still using to this day. They're always pushing to see how they could become more streamlined and more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's the interesting thing about the IT projects, is that you can have excellent experts top of mind, and but if there is no communication, then the project will fail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. And but it was a joint effort. It wasn't just Divante and KPS. It was also the client. They had some really strong individuals who, exceptional, and we couldn't have done the project without them. And again, as we went through the kickoff, that's something I illustrated, is that we might be on the hook, for delivering the project. However, we can't do it without your support, and that was the key message all the way through.
Okay, so we are reaching almost the end of our sessions. That's the time for a little bit of recap. So from your perspective, what is the most important to watch out for in such a project?
Let me have a quick think about that. I mean, there's so much to sort of think about, really. So I think some of the biggest challenges for me on that project, looking back, were obviously COVID, but we talked about that already. Environments. So environments was a key problem we had, in that we asked for a set of environments at the beginning of the project. We didn't get them, and so we tried to make do. We're trying to do the right thing. But actually that came back to bite us when it came down to who owned what environment later on in terms of like testing and production and all that kind of stuff. So, even though we didn't deal with the environment at the beginning of the project, the extra environment we needed, we had to rush in and implement towards the end of the project, which caused a bit of an overhead on ourselves. But we managed to get it done. So I'd say getting the environment and the foundations in place to deliver the project really well is very important. I think as well, some of the other challenges that we had were around the dependencies. Make sure that there's people driving the dependencies on the client side. So quite often, there could be new integrations needed. Certainly if it's going via some middleware, you need to know what the integration contracts are going to be, so you know what the mappings are. All that stuff has to be sort of planned for up front. And again, what we did in our project was we communicated when we were due to start on certain integrations, and we just said to the relevant people in the client, make sure we've got the information we need by that date. Otherwise, it's going to push out the timeline. And actually, that worked really quite well. And I guess the last sort of big challenge I saw on the project we had was internal company politics. There were some people who wanted SAP, and there were some people who didn't. And don't underestimate how difficult that can make a project to become successful. But ultimately, we've hopefully won everybody over. And as I say, the product is still developing really well. And I think that's and doing really well.
Yeah. From my perspective, I can also add regarding the Spartacus, the things that to watch out for is SAP roadmaps. So they are not always they are just some how to say politely, they are there, but they can change, and they do change often. So throughout the project, we are counting on that some feature will be out of the box released in Spartacus within our project course, but it turned out that it wasn't there delivered. So, but fortunately, we were able to negotiate with the client to move that into another phase after the MVP, and we pulled in something else. So you need to be flexible in such a project.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, we wanted. I remember the functionality very well. It was organization management, and I think we're probably the first project to utilize that functionality. And it was really great functionality when it came, but our eyes were on it arriving in the September, and the plan was to have that completed by the end of the year. But we didn't actually get it. It wasn't available in Spartacus until the end of the year. So obviously we had to sort of bump that out into the next phase. But it is just a guideline, and it is great to see what the plan is and what the type of features you are going to get. But don't hold it to the actual dates.
Eventually the feature was delivered, but the date changed. So you cannot fix your plan that this will be delivered there. You cannot build your roadmap, or you because this Spartacus roadmap is not fixed. You cannot build your own fixed roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. And the approach that SAP take on that is absolutely the right one. You can't release something which isn't ready, and sometimes you've got to have that level of quality assurance. But as Mateusz mentioned, it's a good guideline, but don't rely on the actual rely on the actual dates. Wait until you see the actual release notes before planning it in.
Exactly, or you can have a detailed look into the code, because Spartacus is open source, so you can actually see what is delivered. What is actually started to be coded, and then you can have some kind of be more sure what will be delivered in the next version. Okay, before we finish, I forgot to ask one question, and again about Spartacus, because this is Spartacus centric webinar. How the Spartacus project differed from other projects that you managed previously?
So I guess prior to this one, most of the projects are really kind of using like monolith type applications, like Hybris, for example, where it has its own sort of out the box front end already. So that once you plug in the product data, you can see on the front end the PLP and product details page, a checkout, etc. But from my experience of those types of applications is that, it's quite restrictive, quite old tech as well, I guess, on the front end, but it's quite restrictive or more difficult to be to implement new things. Whereas I guess starting on this previous project with Spartacus was that we essentially started with a blank canvas, and it was great to see every sprint new functionality appearing, and we've tried to do it in a flow as well. We tried to do it from the homepage all the way through the checkout, etc. So we got that basic user journey in, and I guess with the strategy that we had employed, which was to use build components that could be reusable, it really made development very, very quick. Whereas again, as monolith type development, it can be quite tricky, and you're working within constraints of the application itself. Whereas with Spartacus, you've got freedom to do basically anything you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's time for Q&A, but I don't see any questions on LinkedIn or on Zoom. There was one question which Agnieszka already answered, whether the recording will be shared, and yes, it will be shared on our Divante YouTube, so you can watch it later on. Some last words before we end, Robbie.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me to do this. It's great to see you again. If anyone has the opportunity to work with Mateusz, good luck. No, I'm joking. No, it's been an absolute pleasure to know him and work with him. Again, having a key thing to any project being successful is its people. And on the front end, Mateusz really, really owned it. And it's really important to have somebody of that nature who can step up and take on the challenges. And yeah, it's been an absolute joy working with you and to know you as well. But yeah, honestly, thanks very much for having me.
Thanks, and vice versa. As I said in the beginning, you are one of the best project managers that I worked with in my career. So yeah, it was a pleasure, and I've also learned a lot from you. And I hope this whole webinar and this discussion was valuable for the attendance here and for the people who will watch it later, because yeah, as I said before, that the one factor is the skills, the technical skills, and the other is how to manage the skills to deliver some value to the end customer.
Completely agree. It's all about the people.
Yeah. So let's finish with this quote. It's all about the people, and see you in the next webinar in some time. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.